Since I started photographing trains about 8 years ago, I've really been obsessed with the idea of capturing a train following the New York State Barge Canal, or I guess originally what we know as the Erie Canal. It's built in the same valley, but it's now they've made sort of a canal out of the river. But what's amazing to me is they built a canal in the 1820s through this valley, out along the Mohawk River, from Albany out to Buffalo. And then because it was there, everything else followed. Shortly after, a railroad followed and mostly put the canal out of business. And of course, the New York State Thruway came through 100 years later and is doing its best to put the railroad out of business. So you end up with this valley that's just filled with different iterations of transportation infrastructure. It's really cool. And of course, the opportunity to line up a shot that shows the train reflected in the water and the canal infrastructure all at once is really, really appealing. Less appealing is the size of working with the canal. Trains are big, but the canal is even bigger. So it was really necessary to bring a lot of light. For this scene, I spent maybe 2.5 hours setting up just because of the number of lights. There's 5 big lights set up along the bulkhead of the canal lock, just pointed out to where the train would be, because my plan was to have the canal house, the lock house, up in the front, and then looking out over the water, a long stretch of train. So a lot of train needs a lot of light. The good news about working at this kind of place is that the state keeps everything clear, so it's really wide open, and you can walk around and you can set up anywhere you want. So that's pretty great. And on this night, since it was kind of cold and rainy, it was just me and the geese and the trains. Didn't see any boats. What's really scary as you set up is if you see lots of trains, because in the Northeast, there's not really a lot of trains. So if they're running now, there's a good chance we'll just run out of them and there won't be any tonight. So it's always a little frightening. So as I set up, a number of trains went by, and then after dark it did get pretty quiet, and I spent several hours just sitting around. So after spending maybe an hour and a half stringing these 5 big lights out along the canal, I powered them all up. There's a radio sync, so they all trigger at the same time. There's a battery inverter to power everything, and then of course you can adjust the power on the light. So I got them set up. Because those lights are kind of tucked in behind the canal house, the radio reception's pretty poor. So I've got some radio repeaters that I was able to set up in line of sight, both to the camera and to the lights, and this gives you really, really reliable radio sync, which is great. I got to thank the folks at the Barge Canal for giving me this nice pile of dirt to work on. One radio repeater up on the top of a tall light stand gave me coverage in the whole area, and that made things a little easier. After the sun went down, I could start making some test exposures and really refining things. Usually as I look at the back of the camera out in the field is my most unhappiness, but everything looks, never like I dreamed or hoped it would be. And then when I get home, I'm usually over it and everything's okay. I made 2 exposures. 2 trains passed within 5 minutes of each other, which was good. They didn't block each other. It probably took another hour and a half to set up and go home. And the next morning, I was able to review the results. I would have loved the reflection, but I think for the complexity of the shot and just all the different surfaces, everything lit up pretty well. So probably won't come back here. On to the next location.